a couple more bonus things when it comes to supply and demand. So it's just some leftovers here. So let's say I've got a supply curve and a demand curve. Here's demand. That's a D. Ooh. This is a supply curve. And label our axes. So some things to note. We've talked a little bit already about how if the price is set too high, or if we have, we haven't really talked about a price floor yet. I can do that in a second. But if the price is set too high, we have a shortage, we have a surplus because too many people want to sell it, not enough people want to buy it. If the price is really low, it means that we have this surplus, lots of people want to buy it, and not enough people want to sell it. So we wind up at this equilibrium. So what this gets us is, here's our equilibrium price. Here's our equilibrium quantity. And what this gets us here is there's somebody up here, this guy right here. And remember, each point on this line, this is a buyer. This is a buyer of this product. And this person would have paid this price way up here. This person would have paid this price. This person would have paid this price. So what we have here is this phenomenon called consumer surplus. So this whole triangle right here above the equilibrium, this is consumer surplus. And we all kind of work to increase our consumer surplus as often as possible because it makes us feel good. I got a deal. The same thing is going on down here. There's a seller. This lady would have sold it for this little, but she can sell it for way up here. Okay, he would have sold it for this price, but he got to sell it for this, the equilibrium price. So same thing, each of the points on this line represents a seller, and this bottom triangle here, this is our producer surplus. And producers look to kind of maximize this as much as they can because more surplus means more money for you, which is nice. So what can happen sometimes, though, is the government can step in and mess up this surplus. So let me back up a second. I'm too lazy to draw this again. So let's say the government decides to add a tax. And the way the tax shows up on here is we get a new supply curve. And this is going to be our supply with tax curve. Go back. Supply plus tax. And the tax is going to be this amount right here. So we have a new equilibrium. That's going to be our new price. But here's the amount that the government is going to take. So this amount right here, the length of this green line. So this is the amount of tax. So that's our per unit amount right there. So what this did, though, is we wind up with a new equilibrium, and we wind up with a new, smaller consumer surplus. That's going to be the consumer surplus. And we're going to wind up with a different producer surplus, too, because the producer of the product is only going to get this much. Oh, wait, I got to go green. They're only going to get this much. So this is going to be the price kind of for the supplier. This over here, this is going to be the price for the demander, the buyer. And this whole, and actually here, so, and this producer surplus is now just this down here, this triangle underneath. It's kind of messy, I'm sorry. And this entire amount right here, this is the total tax revenue right there in green. And it's really paid by two different groups of people. The buyers are going to pay this much, and the sellers are going to pay this much. This looks pretty evenly split between the buyers and the sellers. So the other thing you may notice is we wind up with this triangle right here, and I'll fill it in as best I can. And this triangle right here is kind of, income that's lost, and we call this the deadweight loss. Not toss, loss. That's an L. And that's that yellow bit right there. And that's part that disappears. So what you might want to imagine is what happens when the supply or the demand is more elastic or more inelastic, and as these lines kind of shift and kind of come at each other at different angles, what happens? So I'll leave you with that, and it is time to stop.